Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Friday afternoon, and I'm delighted to be joined by both Brian Degnan and Alan Morrison for 1 hour chat about Celtic, gentlemen. And Happy New Year to you, both of you. We've actually got a brilliant lineup today because we are also going to be joined by Jim Orr, aka the Oracle, and we're here to talk all things Celtic. The mood swings, Brian, the mood swings as a Celtic fan this season have been something completely unlike any other season I can remember. And we were thrown another one on Monday with the departure of Nancy and the return of Martin O'Neill. Brian, talk us through the emotional roller coaster. I think it's more like a ghost train or the waltzers than a roller coaster. What's it been like for you?
It's certainly it's been a bit of a horror show. I think as much as anything, it's been yeah, twists and turns, lots going on. It's just been so chaotic and like from the start of the season, came back to the summer under Rodgers, and he started to feel, and we spoke about privately. I think something's not quite right here. There's something not quite right. And then when across the city, and they had Russell Martin, and it was a shambles, and we were all laughing, and people were saying, Jamestown going to Hearts, then he's going to take that serious, and we're still going to win this league at a canter, and everything's going to be fine. Then it just unravelled so quickly. Then Martin New comes in, picks up a bit of steam, then unravels completely again under Nancy. And now Martin New's back, and we go, all right, okay. It's almost like the start of a new season. It's like, right, okay, for some reason we've got a 6 point deficit. Let's sign a couple of players and make that up over the course of the season. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it, because like there's been so much change, and obviously Tisdale's been punted, rightfully so. And you look now and you go, okay, it's almost a new landscape in many ways. And you're sort of going, right, okay, because Rangers in a different position for the start of the season. Hearts in a really good position. Even teams like Hibs and Motherwell are doing well, Motherwell in particular. So you sort of go, all right, it's almost like everyone's recruited really well over the summer. You're starting the season and it's now fresh. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it, because it's very easy to get jaded with everything that's been happening and stop sort of just looking forward to the football, between the board protests and everything going on with that stuff as well. And actually, I think for the first time since Martin left, the second time, I'm looking forward to a game again. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow and excited to see how it pans out.
This is the thing, and whenever we have Alan Morrison on, it's interesting to hear Alan's take on the negative aspect of why it didn't work. I would guess under Wilfried Nancy. Let's break that side of things down. But just generally, Alan, how are you feeling here? I mean, because I do feel as though we've been given a boost by Martin O'Neill coming in. He's the guy that I think brings a unity to a lot of the different aspects of what's going wrong this season with Celtic, the fans, the club. I think he's going to breathe new life and energy into the squad, which Martin O'Neill knows the limitations of the squad. I felt his press conference was very much like, this isn't going to be easy for me. It's not a magic wand, and I will be judged on my performances and my results as well. We saw some of the performances weren't great in the 8-game period under Martin earlier on this season. But Alan, I'm going to ask you quite a wide-ranging question. We might all just sit tight with a wee cuppa here because there might be quite a lot to talk about. Where did it all go wrong? I'm going to ask you that question. 33 days, 8 games. Wilfried came, Wilfried left. Where did it all go wrong for you? On the park.
Right. So in our rather niche, odd, wee sort of slice of the universe that we operate in on Huddle Breakdown, we talk about risks all the time. That's kind of a staple of what we do, is try and identify what are the things that could go wrong, what is the potential of them going wrong, what can we do about it. And during the COVID season, and I'll borrow an analogy from my friend James on Huddle Breakdown. He talked about the Jenga tower, the game where you pull the bricks out, and because it still looks like a tower until it's a pile of rubble, right?
Yep.
So, but you can tell that it's architecturally unstable, even though it still looks like a tower. And that's kind of where Celtic have been for a number of years now, really. It looks like a tower, but it's actually structurally deeply unsound. And what you'll find is that, when one thing fails, other things fail as well because you've piled risk upon risk upon risk, and therefore it can unravel very slowly at first and then very quickly, to borrow another phrase. So where did it all go wrong? Implies that this was some sudden implosion that happened here, and of course it wasn't, because Wilfred Nancy walked into a highly dysfunctional football club, and he was given virtually no help or support along the way. You think back to what happened on day one. What normally? I mean, Paul, you're way more versed in this stuff than I am in terms of dealings with Celtic press, PR, public relations, and press conferences. I don't get involved in any of that stuff, but I know you do. Um, but my recollection is that when a new manager joins Celtic, there's a big press conference, everyone's invited, the room's packed. There's the CEO on one side, there's the chairman on the other, there's a meet and greet, there's handshakes, there's photographs, we're delighted to have Wilfred along. We think this is a great new era for the club is starting today, blah, 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 blah. And then there'll be like maybe a meet and greet with the fan media afterwards and get to know the fans, build some engagement, etc., etc. Is that fairly typical of what happens when a new manager comes to Celtic? Have I got
Yeah,
that right?
absolutely.
So
And you
this
could you could trace it back over several managers, Alan. That is our approach.
So this guy was basically wheeled in, stuck in front of the cameras before the Hearts game on his own, and left to get on with it. Now, what does that tell you about the buy-in, the support of those in the background that were there? And then, of course, after that, I'll come to the football in a minute, because there is blame to go around across the board here. Don't worry. Then what happens? We all start seeing through, prominent bloggers, podcasters, well-known Celtic fans, consistent messaging. We've all seen WhatsApp messages about this player's unhappy, or this has happened, or this nose has been put out of joint, what have you. When that's consistent and when it's across multiple channels, that's called briefing. And so, you have to think that the people inside Celtic potentially have been, perhaps behaving not with the best of honour in terms of supporting this guy. So I just think, and then you add in the actual situation at the club itself in terms of the infrastructure, the capabilities of the people, Paul Disdale's situation, the fact that the head of scouting had walked away,
Yeah.
the fact they didn't have a transfer window. And even if he did have a transfer window, the transfer window performance of Celtic as a football club has been abysmal for a number of years now. So this isn't some sudden thing that manifests itself in bad outcomes on the football pitch. This has been brewing for a long time, and when you throw in a high degree of variance, namely a new manager who probably too quickly tries to adopt a new style of play, a new shape, a new patterns on the field, then all that does really is highlight the fact that this is not a resilient organization. This is not a resilient structure of a football club. And the change that you've introduced is almost the tipping point that shines a light on how dysfunctional this all is. And none of that is to excuse Nancy, whose main failing was one of, I style it as change management. That's a phrase because of my career and my history in work. It's
Hmm.
something I did for 20, 30 years. But essentially, it was a failure of change management. It wasn't a failure of tactics. It wasn't a failure of philosophy or any of that rubbish. It was a failure of change management, of failing to take people with him on the journey, failing to convince people this is the way we need to go, and failing to implement it in a way that was sensible and appropriate for the situation that the club found itself in that time. So that's on Wilfred Nancy, and he will reflect at his leisure on how he could have prepared better, how he could have implemented change better. But he was almost doomed to fail from the start because of the state that the football club is in, and because of the what I think has been really poor behaviour by lots of people in the football club. They're all now scrambling for credit for getting rid of them. Well, I mean, that's pretty distasteful if you ask me.
Yeah, agree.
What does
I
that
agree with
tell
that.
you about the lack of the support that he did or didn't get in
Hmm.
in his time? As far as the actual football was concerned, I'm going to say something now that's probably going to upset a lot of people, but these are facts. This is from StatsBomb. StatsBomb is probably the best of the football vendors in terms of the quality of their data. Of the three managers that we've had this season, Under which manager has Celtic generated the most shots, the highest XG per game, the highest XG per shot, the most counter-attacking shots, the most XG from set pieces? Oh, that's going to trigger a few. Double the number of high press shots, and the most kind of clear shots, which are shots that you're unopposed to the goal. Now, you know the answer to this, right? But there is a counter to that, of course. The defensive performances were borderline shambolic, chaotic, and that is also true. All those things can be true at the same time. So I'm not sitting here advocating that Wilfred Nancy should still be the manager of Celtic. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the structures, the situation, the politics, the lack of quality, the lack of ability, the state of the squad, all of those things that were present and undermined Wilfred Nancy are still there today and could potentially underline Martin O'Neill.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant input, Alan. And you've given Celtic a new merchandise idea for when the boycott is lifted, and that is Celtic Jenga, which will be, I'm sure, available next year, this time, just before Christmas. The other thing you mentioned there about the PR aspect of it, and I don't mind sharing this, because when you are, which I do, create content on Celtic every single day, and we're going to be putting content every single day out this year, 365 days in 2026, you do come up with various different ideas and concepts. Some of them maybe won't work, but I will pitch them when I come up with them. And I did say to the PR team, who obviously have at this moment in time shut us out of the press conferences, etc., I said, isn't this a great opportunity to get everybody back round the table? Fan media, that is, because obviously the Ultras have also been banned. But for fan media, I say this is a great opportunity. You've got a new manager here. The CEO could be there, the manager could be there, and the fan media could all be there as well. So it was pretty obvious and clear to me, or anybody paying attention, that that was a good opportunity, not just for PR, but it was probably time to get everybody back in. And one of the things the departed manager, didn't have, I feel, was that connection. Now, it's a tiny little cross-section of the fan base when you think about fan media, but we then come in the next day having met the man. Jim Orr will tell you about his dealings with Brendan Rodgers, for example. He made an incredibly positive impression on Jim. Jim then starts talking about that on Acsom to the tens of thousands of people that tune in. There might then be a knock-on effect of having that connection. He never had that connection, Jim, I don't feel, with the fans. And by the way, if I'm thinking maybe in the modern age, who was the last Celtic manager who didn't have the connection with the fans? You probably have to go back quite some time to find the answer to that one. Jim, where do you think it all went wrong? I agree with Alan. There was loads of things the club didn't do right. Personally, I think Nancy did have to go. We are where we are now, and we're going to have to deal with that. It's not going to be ideal in the transfer window. But where do you think it went wrong? And what was your tipping point? I was asking JP this yesterday, Jim. What was your tipping point?
I think first, apologises for being late. I'm still throwing out. Secondly, when you follow Alan Morrison, all you've got to say is what he says. Everything Alan says is spot on. I also think that, we know the club, excuse me, has been dysfunctional for a number of years, but if you take why are we where we are just now, you got to get back to, I think I said during the summer that I thought the manager's contract situation would completely overshadow the whole season. Would he sign an extension? And if he didn't sign an extension, would the board back him? He didn't sign an extension. The board didn't back him. And the current crisis, I think, all stems from that. Because to quote the great man, we manufactured our own stress. That's what we did this season. And if we'd have backed Brendan, what do you think Brendan Rodgers is, good, bad or indifferent? If we'd have backed him at the start of the transfer window, when 17 million quid came in for Nicholas Kuhn, take the 17 million and spend that wisely. If we'd have backed him then, in my opinion, we'd be in the Champions League just now. In my opinion, we'd be top of the SPFL. And in my opinion, being in the Champions League gives us tens of millions and more pounds. So, and if we lose the league this year, that's an opportunity lost to make tens of millions of pounds next year in the Champions League. So that decision for me, again, we talk about the board of the club, it's down to one man and one man only, and that's the puppet master who's there. He's made that decision and it's cost us dearly. And if we do lose the league, you can point to lots of fingers like Rodgers and Nancy River, but they're just, they're just symptoms in this. We know who the cause is. And if we do lose the league and there's a flag day at Ibrox or Tynecastle, I think he should go along and raise the flag. Because I don't think there's been any one person more to we're to blame, if that's the right word, for us not winning the league. And that's a concern. The tipping point, I said last week that Motherwell was a tipping point, basically. And that makes it even more bizarre that I think, again, you'll know better than me, Paul, as Bertie used to say, you'll know better than me, son, that the majority of Celtic fans didn't want Nancy after Motherwell. And I agree with Alan. I mean, sometimes in life it's better to be lucky than good. And I don't know if Wilfred Nancy was a good or a bad manager, but he's an unlucky manager. When you look at the stats, he was unlucky. The chances that we missed and the goals that we gave away, I mean, none more so than the Livingston left back scoring 2 goals in the first 8 minutes. These things are just bizarre, incredibly bizarre. So to give him the game last Saturday, I thought was ridiculous because basically it was a 6-pointer. If we do lose this league by less than 6 points, that decision alone, just leaving it to that extra game, was bizarre. And when I say it's my opinion, I think you look online and people doing surveys and polls and stuff like that, 90-odd% of Celtic fans are saying enough's enough. And again, no harm to William Nancy. Right guy, wrong movie, or whatever the phrase is that kind of goes behind that. But basically, it's frustrating because this is all of our own making. So, and when you lose things, when you do your very best, you're incredibly disappointed. If I go back to the Seville season when we didn't win anything, you were so disappointed because that team deserved so much more. The same 2 years later with Martin Neal. But when we lost the league in the COVID season, there was a kind of apathy, anger, kind of, this was our fault. And the same looks to be happening this season. If we do lose the league, it's not disappointment, it's kind of apathy, anger, and it's all directed at one person and one person only. And I agree with you that it's incredibly distasteful, people lining up to say it was me that sacked him. It was me that sacked him. I think it's appalling. And all the stuff Alan said there about when the guy's on his first day, he was left on his own. Totally, utterly scandalous. And that all comes from the top. Everyone else are just puppets.
You're right. They are. And that is why they are selected in the positions that they're selected in. I think we're in a situation at the moment where we've got these... Alan was talking about change management. I also think you've got to look at crisis management. So we're dealing with a bit of a crisis just now. And we need to get through that before we then start looking at all these underlying issues that made up the Jenga game, which none of us want to play. It's almost like having, when you're looking at having firewalls, Brian, it's like we have no firewalls. The minute something goes wrong, it just goes right to the heart of the club and everything is ruined. I sometimes think that when you look at Celtic, you can simplify it. I think you can simplify it. You can look at the people in charge of the club and say, right, we're in a situation that is probably unique insofar as Scottish football is where we are, right? So we're a massive club in Scottish football. There are certain drawbacks, but there's certain other things that you can celebrate being a club in Scotland. And one of the biggest ones is the fact that we're the most supported game. When you're looking at football all over Europe, you look at Scottish football and the percentage of people that go and watch a game of football is higher in Scotland than anywhere else. So you've got to look at that. But we rely on that, Brian. We rely on the fans at the turnstiles. We rely on the income that we as supporters generate for the football club more than, let's say, a team down south, to use our closest neighbours, right? So we rely on the fans far more than a lot of these other clubs. I remember the Bayern Munich chief going on about the price of a season ticket. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter because that isn't the main source of income for Bayern Munich. So you've got to focus on the fans because we are one of two of the biggest income streams that the club can rely upon. You should look after us anyway because it's the right thing to do, Brian. But if you're looking at it just from, figures and business and, Jim's previous career as an accountant, you would say, right, the two big things you need to look after is the fans, because look at the income stream that they bring to this football club and making sure you do well in Europe. So make sure you get to the Champions League. So that means that the winning the league has to be a given because we're focusing on the Champions League because that income stream is so big and so important to this football club. And you ask yourself the question, these two big pillars, Brian, has the football club looked after the fans? No. Have they been prepared for the Champions League? No, because we didn't get in because we got knocked out by Kyrat. So they failed on the two big pillars, really. That's what it comes down to. Everything else is, layers and layers and layers within the finances of the football club. But the two big things, look after the fans and look after Europe, we've failed on both counts, haven't we?
Absolutely. And I mean, in terms of the fan point first, any business anywhere has to rely on a customer base, right? So if you look at football as a business, the fans are your customer base, right? So you want to appease the fans, or at least communicate with your customers. You know, they are the people who. I mean, I was watching a podcast the other day with Henrik Larsson, and people kept saying, "Oh, fans are really special, the club's really special." And it's like that because that's what people understand. People outside look at the European nights, they look at the fan base, they look at that atmosphere, they look at that sort of the socially progressive sort of politics within the club. Look at all these things that separates the club, a bit like the way Barcelona are. And if I'm running a business and that's my unique selling point, that's what I endorse, that's what I get involved with, that's what I want to protect, that's what I want to grow and grow that brand. Then you look at it in the structural side of things, and you know, one of the things I think I've said more in this podcast than anything else is strategy. Seen it since day one, since I first appeared in the podcast just after Neil Lennon had been sacked, before Ange came in. And I said at the time, and I think it was with Kev Graham I was on, and I said, we need a strategy long term so that it's sustainable. I went, and what we know we can't do is match the player profiles of the biggest clubs in the world. We can't sign these guys. Unless we identify them way before anyone else, we're not going to get that level. But what we can do is every other part that makes it a club like that successful, we can replicate.
Yeah.
Your data resources, infrastructure, scouts, director of football, like modernisation, sustainability, all these basic things. Like Celtic Park, we're one of the richest clubs in certainly in the UK, I think maybe in Europe, in terms of like sheer profit, no debt. And we've got a stadium that's crumbling to bits. It should be a glorious stadium. We should have the best of tech behind the scenes. There's all these equalisers we could make that we just don't do. So when you talk about your two pillars, you talk about the footballing side of the business and the customer base side of the business. So your product and your customer. And we feel spectacular at both. And yet somehow, Jim said it, better luck than the good. Somehow these guys at the top of the chain, your CEO, etc., are sitting on mega bucks. In any other business, they're out the door and it's a shambles and it's a write-off and you need to totally regroup and start again. But for some reason, we're ploughing on. And the irony is, the reason we're able to plough on is because there'll always be a really strong, passionate, loyal customer base, football fans, especially Celtic fans. And they take us for granted to the point where they can have these poor business practices and this negligence in their strategy or lack of strategy and then just write it off. And it's so disappointing. And again, they've looked again. We get Martin Neal back because in a way he's the perfect solution for them because he gets the fans back on side, large majority right away. He'll steady the ship domestically. I think if we get a couple of players that suit his way of playing, and we might come on to that later, I think there's no reason we can't win the league against all odds, really, given the season. And then if they're sensible, this is when they go, right, let's bridge the gap with the fans. Let's get a proper infrastructure behind the scenes and then properly recruit the next manager and the next playing staff coming in so that it's then sustainable. This is their opportunity to right all these wrongs because they've got a man in charge here who will unite the fans and take the chatter, apart from on here, onto the football itself and keep people focused on that and positive. So they've got a great opportunity here to fix it and nothing's unfixable. In Celtic, I know you're watching. Someone's watching from the club. Just do what I'm saying, right? Get someone smarter than me to help, but ask for the help and get it because this is the chance to fix it.
You're talking there about focus. I find this really interesting because every pre-season we talk about our vision, our, as fans, our expectations, our focus is always has been on Acsom to say how can we improve in Europe, right? But what happens, Alan, is very quickly our focus, because we're in crisis at the moment, right? In terms, it's a small crisis. I'm not going to put up the club crests cracked in half like the papers used to, but it's crisis mode in terms of decision making. What do we need to do right now to sort this out? We're putting out fires, all these different ways that we could describe it. But our focus now is on the league. Alan, our focus now is on the fact that we're third in the league. And we absolutely criticise, and rightly so, the board for saying, your ambition is only to be 1 point ahead of Rangers, but then they throw us as fans into a situation where we have to focus on that because we're in such a bad place just now, Alan. Now, I would find it difficult to believe that, and I know loads of folk are going to come in and say, absolutely, this is what they want. I don't know how you could manufacture that. Could you manufacture that by putting in the Exeter City manager as your football head of operations and Columbus Crew manager as the manager? Yeah, I get the argument. But I was rewatching the Brian Dempsey interview last week that Jim Orr and I did. And Brian was like, surely the directors haven't done this by design. I mean, that would just be madness, would it not? But when you look at the quality or otherwise of our squad, Alan, you look at the fact that we were in a position with all that money in the bank where we could be looking at things that Brian mentioned there, like the stadium. We're no longer kind of focusing on that. We're focusing on getting players in, winning this league. So we've been thrown into that lack of ambition bucket by the board, Alan. And that needs to stop as well, because we had every right in the summer to be saying, how can we build on that? Being in a playoff in the Champions League against Bayern Munich. We had every right to discuss that. Now that's like a distant memory. Nobody on here is talking about Bologna. No one on here is talking about Utrecht. No one's talking about what we can do in the Europa League. It's almost, we're in survival mode, Alan, and the board have put us in that mode, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, you made a great point, really, about the income streams and focusing on fan money, because the money in the bank is the fans' money. It's not the directors' money. They're not loans. They're not, as a result of share offerings that the directors have put in. That's the fans' money that's in the bank, right? Match day, which essentially is money from supporters, right? It's the season ticket money. It's who pays in the gate, pies, and all that sort of stuff. Match day for Celtic accounts for 45% of revenue. 45% of revenue. If you look at a club like Arsenal, Manchester United, that will be probably below 20%.
Yeah.
Right. So for as you rightly say, for Celtic and for every other club in Scotland, matchday revenue, i.e., us, the fans, accounts for 45% of revenue. So if you're going to piss off 45% of your revenue base, then that is not good business management. And secondly, you called out the Champions League there and the lack of focus on that. Champions League money is around about 20%. It increases revenues by about 20% when Celtic are in the Champions League. Because Celtic hover around the 100 million revenue mark at the moment. It goes down by 20% if we're in the Europa League. It goes up by 20%, 20 million, sorry, if we go into the Champions League. So you add those two things together. If you're not focusing all your minds on those two things, that's 65% of your revenue is things that you can control, i.e., engage the fans, give them something that they're wanting to go and see, etc. Giving your team every opportunity to qualify for the Champions League, i.e., have your recruitment operation geared around that timetable and that timetable only. Then, if you're not doing those things, which the club aren't, then you're you're jeopardizing 65% of your revenue, and that is, to talk the language of the board, that's just bad business management, just bad practice. I mean, that's incompetence actually that we're seeing here. I don't subscribe to any sort of conspiracy theories of people trying to sabotage anything. Never go down that road when incompetence is staring you right in the face, right?
Yeah.
So that's damning to me. Just those two things. I mean, if you and then if you think, you know, if you look at all the clubs that Celtic have lost to in Champions League qualifiers, your Ferencvaroses, your Malmos, your Mariboras, your Kairats, go on and on and on and on. 7 or eight ties against teams, Midtjylland, teams the size of Falkirk, right? This is what we're talking about here. Teams the size of Falkirk that we're losing to not get Champions League money because we're underprepared, because the board, from a business perspective, are not organising their activities to focus on those qualifying dates and have the business functioning smoothly to meet those qualifying dates in a way that the team is optimised to be productive on those dates. Failed to do that for year after year after year. And if you add up all the money that's the opportunity cost of all the money, that the revenue that Celtic haven't made from those campaigns, and listen, football's capricious, football, high variance, luck plays a huge factor. We wouldn't have won all those ties, even with a a coherent, well recruited side.
Mhm.
But we probably would have won, I don't know, 70% of them, right? Where would that take us in terms of, redeveloping the main stand? And what would that do to increase revenues over the long term? Where would that place Celtic in terms of having a venue that could be used 365 days a year, that would
Yeah.
be at the top of the UEFA category list? How much exposure and additional revenue would that give Celtic over a large number of years? This is why there is fan unrest. These are the failings of this board. And as you say, why? And I joked about this on Huddle Breakdown last night. Why is it that every season, when I should be saying, how are we planning for the summer? How are we planning for the qualifier that we're going to have in July or whatever it is? When instead, what I'm saying is the same as I've been saying for the last 4 or 5 seasons. Oh, we just need to win this league. We just need to win this league. And so what we're going to end up doing, we're going to end up buying a load of 28, 30, 32-year-olds in this window to just try and get the league over the line.
Mhm.
We're already an aging squad. It's already a squad that has little resale value in it, which is supposed to be part of the business model, right? So across the board, because of failings in one direction, again, the Jenga tower, you start failing in other areas as well. So yeah, it's a mess, I'm afraid.
It is a mess, and we have been thrown into the crisis bucket. We are going to be talking about a fairly big, high-profile link that we've got to a former player, and I'm going to go round the room. I'll give you my view on it as well with regards to Kyogo Furuhashijin, a hero from the Ange Postecoglou era, still played prominently under Brendan Rodgers, but not to the kind of same level, I don't think. He leaves the club a year ago and has had 2 failed, I would say, stints in France and in England. And the speculation is rife that he's coming back to Celtic on a short-term deal, Jim. A short-term deal, I think it would cost us, the figures I was looking at this morning was 750 grand as a loan fee, plus something like half of his 40 grand wages, there or thereabouts. What do you make of this, Jim? Because it does highlight some of the issues that Alan touched on there with recruitment and the scouting that we will have to sort out eventually. But we are kind of desperate for a striker, and we have been for some time. What do you make of it all, Jim?
Before I answer that, just to echo everything Alan said there.
You said that before. You said that last time.
That's what I'm going to do today. You say what he says. Because this is not a new thing. It's not just happened today. And it was just, as Alan was talking, thinking about things like the last time Martin O'Neill left back in 2005.
Yeah.
There was a comment attributed to him about get used to life in the slow lane, or words to that effect, because you're not going to be buying the Suttons and the Lennons and these guys anymore. And there's been a banner the GB have periodically that says don't fall asleep at the wheel. So these have been going on for a long, long, long time. And I know that Kevin Graham's the kind of sort of king of Acsom, king of analogies, but thinking about all that driving analogy, it's like we're like, that kind of a driver that sits in the inside lane and we're just doing 56 mile an hour because that's the most, efficient, fuel economy kind of thing, just driving along, not paying attention to anything, not really bothering, never veering into the middle lane because that's a bit risky, or even the far lane. You would never do that for miles and miles and years, and you do nothing at all. And all of a sudden there's a car having to stop 100 yards away and you can't stop quickly enough and you smash into the back of it and you blame the car. And you've had all this time to deal with that. And you've had all this time to deal with all these things for the last 20 years, something like that. And it becomes more and more difficult to say something new about the same thing. So I'm pretty sure if you put a podcast of me on last year, 2 years, 4 years ago, we're saying the exact same thing. And it's incredibly frustrating. In terms of Kyogo, he's match fit. I think that's all I'd say, because he'll be coming back if he's coming back, and there's no Jota, there's no Abada, so he's coming back into a different team. Will he get the service? Don't know. His confidence can't be that high. I think we're at that desperate stage that we're not looking any further than this window. We're not going to buy any Champions League ready players in this window. We could never do that anyway, and we couldn't afford that. I think the way things are going, we might not even get into the Champions League this year. So I agree with Alan. I think we're looking at guys who will help Martin O'Neill try and get us over the line. So we're looking no further than this transfer window and trying to get wins under our belts to give us a decent chance of trying to win this league. And after Martin came in last week, I wouldn't say that. I'll say I'm less negative than there was before. I thought if Nancy stayed, I was really negative about their chances. Him leaving, I'm less negative. And the reason that I'm not saying that I'm less negative is because I look at the squad that we've got, and Martin O'Neill can't work miracles. And as Alan points out in Huddle Breakdown, although Martin put points on the board, a lot of those games are pretty tight. And at some point we might have run out of luck a wee bit, and I think he was a wee bit lucky. And I said and Martin O'Neill's lucky than good, brilliant. I'm all for that. So it's not going to be straightforward. As at one point we thought, rid of Nancy, bring on Martin O'Neill, we're going to win the league. Now it's happened. You're actually thinking, well, that squad isn't that good, and Alistair Johnson's not coming back to March, and Jota might not be back, and Carter Vickers. We're having to go with these guys, and we can supplement them with some other guys. Will we actually get these deals over the line? And that's the thing about recruitment and the dysfunctional nature of the club, that one assumes at some point we were looking for players for Rodgers, and we had some sort of database or Excel spreadsheet or a notepad or something with a bunch of names on it. He then leaves, so they would
stone scratchings, Jim. Let's go right back.
It's
Etch-a-sketch.
a whiteboard, Jim. It's a whiteboard.
Whiteboard, modern technology, post-it pad. So basically, they would then bin them because Martin O'Neill's, he's only temporary. So we'll not actually look for anyone for him. Then we get Nancy in, so we want guys to fit his system. So do we bin them now because Martin O'Neill's in? Whole thing's shambolic. Who's actually looking for players? What's the criteria? How's it going to work? The whole thing's a bit of a mess. So, and that's what leads me to be less negative than what we were before. I'm not positive yet because of all that there. Kyogo, I think that's the kind of signings that we're looking to. And I said in the Acsom group chat, I think we need to spend, if it was me, I'd be spending a lot of money on SPFL players, young up-and-coming guys with the odd kind of like senior pro in there somewhere. Your kind of Mulligans and your Kingsley at Hearts and your Watson and even Big Gogic. I know people will say, well, he's not Celtic class. Well, if you compare to Balakwisha and Tunitke, Gogic is Celtic class. Natural, so when we were training down at Torrey Glen earlier and I saw Gogic close up, he's a scary big guy. So I know people say you can't get Gogic. I think those are the kind of, in the trenches, we need to dig in and we need to win games of football. And what we don't want to do, I think, is sign the kind of players from foreign markets because they're going to come in and have to get settled and they're living in hotels and all this. So we need, what was the phrase? Oven ready, match ready, what do you want to call it? Guys who can hit the ground running. And I thought it was bizarre last week bringing this guy who hasn't, the right back we brought in last week, who hasn't kicked a ball in 5 months and get sent off. And that, you're thinking, why be back? What's the thinking behind that? Where's the logic? And I don't mind us failing as long as the decisions we make are all kind of evidence-based. And Alan's full of evidence-based stuff. It's all about, can you justify what you're doing? If we make good evidence-based decisions and we don't win the league, hey-ho, we're not going to blame anyone for doing that because that's what you do. But when you make these ridiculous signings, you're thinking, why?
On the back of that, Jim, for the 8.5 years that Acsom's been creating content, I've said this time and time again, Brian, there's so many teams that don't hit their full potential in Scottish football. And it's about time they got their act together, and it looks as though some of these teams absolutely have, and they're maximising, with the resources that they have available to them, they're maximising a lot of these other areas that we've kind of let slide quite a bit, Brian. But on the note of Kyogo Furuhashi and whether or not he's coming back to Celtic, I get both sides of the argument, because it is pretty bad recruitment that we can't identify somewhere in the world a better striker who fits the criteria that we set in terms of resale value, age profile, etc. But I think it's a combination of two things for me. A, we're in crisis mode, and B, we need to bring somebody in who knows the standards and the expectations of Celtic, because a lot of these guys that Jim mentioned are probably not bad footballers, but we've spent £5 million on them, and they're taking a while to adapt to not only the style and the lifestyle and the environment, Brian, but the expectations. They come into Celtic. A lot of these guys have never been in a dressing room where a draw is a disaster. Never mind 6 defeats out of 8. I mean, that is just like the thing's going to blow up at that stage. So I can see the merits in bringing Kyogo in. It is a sticky plaster, Brian. Absolutely it is. But if I get the opportunity to bring him in between now and the end of the season, I'm all for it. What's your take on it, Brian?
So it's a strange one because I think when Jota came back, I was over the moon, and if you were telling me tomorrow Matt O'Reilly was coming back, I'd be over the moon, because I think these are guys that have still got lots of sort of mileage and lots of room to take us forward, and would fit into certainly Martin O'Neill's system and would do well. I'd be concerned with Kyogo coming back, that I'm not sure how he works in the way we're likely to play under Martin O'Neill. I'm concerned that because we don't play the way. I mean, like when he under Ange, it was perfect. It was the perfect player in the perfect system. It was like a match made in heaven, and it was wonderful, and that's why he cemented his status. I'd be concerned bringing him back. Would there'd be so much expectation on his shoulders, and I'm not sure it would work from a football sense. If he's coming back on loan, fair enough. It's kind of a low risk proposition, so you can accept that. But we still need at least another striker in. And at Jim's point, it was the point I made earlier as well. Strategy, like if you're going to sign players, and this goes for the academy up, it has to be players that are suited to play in a system and a style of play. So even if the formation itself becomes irrelevant, if the approach is the same. So if you want to play a high pressing, you need big athletic guys, strong, fast, that can, and then the formation itself is interchangeable if the approach is the same. But if you keep changing approaches all the time, to Jim's point, you can't have any sort of sustainability over the term unless the players are at such an adaptable high level. However, going back to what we were talking about, transfers and Kyogo coming in, that's actually why I agree with Jim, and that I think we should be looking to sign a few guys for the SPFL. No sure about Gogic as much, to be fair, but in principle, I think that's right, because, like you said, Paul, these are guys that know whether they support Celtic or no. They know what it's all about. They know the league. They know what it's all about. And if you get guys like Mulligan in, is he a better player technically than Engels or Bernardo? Maybe not. But he's going to know what he has to do. He's going to run through a wall for that opportunity. He's young. He's fit. He's strong. There's no reason. And he's going to low wages and low transfer fee. There's no reason can I take a chance, guys like that. The boy, Kilmarnock Watson, looks a good player. There's a boy at Dundee as well, Graham, centre half. Some of the guys at Motherwell just now, what's the name of the striker? He's super fast. Plays a winger. Can't remember. Sorry?
Maswinisi.
Yes, he's signed him. They've actually got a left back as well, really, really rapid. Milne at Hearts, I'd be looking at. There's loads of guys like that I think we could get. Low expenditure, know the league, would do a job, and they've got potential to improve. And if they don't improve, it's not a massive outlay. I don't think they can be taking chances on, players for leagues who it's a gamble. Because like you said, Balakwisha, data-wise, is probably a good footballer. Engels is a brilliant footballer. He might be not a great footballer for Celtic. And this is the problem. You're signing guys that are on paper are great, but don't fit. Whereas like these guys for the SPFL, you know what you're getting. You see them all the time. They know what they're coming into, and it's a low risk. And then I think that might be the happy compromise between the short-termism of just winning this league, but also having that mileage of these younger guys that could probably take us forward.
I found it interesting. Martin O'Neill mentioned that Sean Maloney's been doing a lot of work in respect of recruitment, but Martin will be given final sign-off when it comes to actually signing the players. We've heard this before.
Yeah.
Before I jump on to other board matters, and of course looking ahead to the next few fixtures, none less so than tomorrow's. Alan, give me your take on Kyogo. I believe you've got some data to share with us as well. You want us to bring that data up just now, Alan, before you dive in? Here we go.
Yeah. So I mean, the first question I'd ask is ignore the name at the top of the sheet there. If I showed you this profile and I said to you, we've got this guy, striker, we need a striker. By the way, he's 31 years old. He's on 40 grand a week. Are you interested? What would you say?
Yeah,
but this is where we are, right? But listen, putting all that to one side, there is something utterly remarkable about this, of course, which is that Kyogo, this is over the last year since he left Celtic, is generating expected goals of roughly 1 every 2 games and has scored none. And that is pretty remarkable, actually. I've not watched any Birmingham games. I've not seen him play for Rennes or for Birmingham, so I don't know what style of play Birmingham have got. I don't know how they set up, how they get balls into the box, etc. But that is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And of course, the rest of the numbers were probably not that surprised in, because Kyogo wasn't one that was ever really kind of involved in build-up, for example. So his progressive passes and things like that are obviously very low, including his total kind of involvement. So listen, I just thought it was a bit of fun, really. But what to your point about being in crisis mode, Paul, I think is a point well made. And what do you do in crisis mode? You think short term. You think, how do we stop the bleeding? And as I say, you probably, I suspect, what the club will do, especially with Martin O'Neill only being here to the end of the season. That's as far as he's concerned. That's his horizon. That's the only as far as he's thinking, and that's absolutely natural. I mean, that's what he's been paid to do. He'll be thinking, what do I need in the next sort of 5 months? That's all. That's all he cares about. But actually, if we put to one side the sort of buy to develop model, because we're in this crisis mode, if you're going to go down this road of getting more experienced players, this is actually one of the better times to do it, because we've got a World Cup in the summer. So I'm thinking there are dozens, if not hundreds, of footballers around the world who want to be at that World Cup, who aren't getting the game time that they think they should be, or want to, or need to get into World Cup squads, that would be champing at the bit to get football. They may have turned up their nose at Scotland in other scenarios, but this year, because there's a World Cup to play for, they'll be going, I just need to play football. And if I can play football on an attacking, winning team, then I've got a chance to shine. I've got a chance to get into a World Cup, right? So, loan signings are not good generally, because it's dead money. You're basically just giving money away to somebody else. You're not getting anything much in return from it, and you're developing a player for another team. Who will then reap the benefits of it if they sell that player. However, for 5 months, as you say, crisis mode, I think that's not a bad way to go. If Celtic get 4 or 5 players who are sort of in their mid to late 20s, who are of a known standard, who have a strong motivation to perform well, again, World Cup year, then I suspect that's probably the best we can do in the short term to get over this line. I'm saying all these things not because I believe this is the way to run the football club. I'm just responding to the point you made about, are we in crisis mode? And I think that would be the kind of best way to do it. Does Kyogo fit into that model? Maybe. As I say, I haven't seen him. I'm pretty sure he hasn't had his shoulder fixed. And look at Kasper Schmeichel.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I do wonder if he's lost a bit of pace, which really is his best asset with his decision making. His decision making is good, but if you can't get there, then unfortunately it was a great idea, but you didn't get there in time. So I don't know about that. I've not watched him, but on the basis of what I've just said, and all joking aside, it's maybe not the worst idea, but again, it just speaks to the laziness, the lack of imagination, within the football club around striking targets around the world. That's the only name you can come up with.
I know. No, you're absolutely right, Alan. And thanks for sharing the data. He's had a right tough 12 months of it. I remember before he left Celtic, he signed off with a hat-trick of disallowed goals against Young Boys of Bern. It's announced that night that he's gone. It was one of the ones whereby we didn't get that opportunity. A lot of players don't get that opportunity to say farewell to the Celtic support. He might come back in and finally get up to that 100 goal mark that I predicted he would back in the day, sitting on 85 for Celtic. Joe Hamilton songs, Afternoon Troops, still banning the Green Brigade, sack the board. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. Stephen Sloan, Lennon twice, Rodgers, Martin O'Neill 3 times, KT, Jota, Kyogo maybe twice, Izagiri, Lobble. I'd love to know what our scouts do all year round. Yes, and sometimes it works, Stephen. Sometimes it works. Sean Maloney, as a coach and as a player, came back again as well, didn't he? Ryukin, that's Street Fighter 2, is it not? Back in the day, one for the retro gamers. Having Kyogo back for a 6-month loan, I haven't got a problem with. We need someone who knows the league to come in and bang in a few goals. If there's anyone who can get Kyogo scoring again, it's Martin O'Neill. I'd love to see it. I would actually. But Paul McLean comes in talking about Kyogo like it's happened. This is Celtic you're talking about. Yes, absolutely, you're right. I know, how dare we assume that we might get the deal done. And Stevie Boy comes in to say we need a striker in yesterday. What's the hold up? Absolutely. And again, I think that we're in that point where we've had a recruitment team, we've had a head of that operation, and that's kind of been shaken up and we're dealing with it slightly differently now. And the manager, I'm pretty sure Martin O'Neill, would have says to Dermot Desmond and then, of course, the CEO, that if I'm coming in here, I need to have a say on these transfers because I'm going to live and die by the results that they give me. Next few fixtures, gents. We're talking short-termism. Tomorrow it's Dundee United at home, Falkirk on Wednesday away, and then Auchinleck Talbot next Sunday. 17:30 hours. That's a kick-off of 5:30. Then we start talking Bologna at home, Hearts away, Utrecht at home. Tough 6 games, but it's always going to be a tough 6 games. Right, I want to touch on, Jim, the point that came up there around the Green Brigade. Joe Hamilton brought it up. We're all talking unity. Brian Wilson speaks about the need for unity. Martin O'Neill talks about, I'm happy to be a mediator. I'll talk to the fans. The collective released a statement saying that we haven't heard back from Brian Wilson in relation to the olive branch that's been handed out there. We've not heard back from Brian Wilson yet. The Green Brigade are still banned. There's a wee bit of work to be done here, Jim. How do we get there? How do we get around the table? What's the best way of doing that?
Before answering that, back to Kyogo, then, if we were 10 points clear, we wouldn't be looking at Kyogo. That's all. It's because we're in this crisis mode, and that's why we're looking at some of the players that we need to try and get us over this line. In terms of Green Brigade, I don't think the club are interested at all. Otherwise, they'd have done something before now. I think they have got the perception of, as I said, there was one of the collective meetings when the guy was saying that they both think we're just a bunch of wee fannies, quote unquote. The guy's 37 years old, so I think that, a lot of the guys in the Green Brigade, the boys, stuff like that, are just fans who want to go and watch their teams. There's the odd idiot, and you're going to get the odd idiot here and everywhere, but you can't punish everyone on the behaviour of a few people who have misbehaved. If they were interested in resolving this, they'd have done it before now, and they haven't done it before now. And you get the situation we had last week at the game, where that whole section is empty when we need their support. So it's counterproductive. I'm not condoning anything that someone may or may not have done, but the majority of people who are in the Green Brigade and the boys just want to go along and support their team. I've said this before, communication is the most important thing in any organisation. They have to communicate, and they haven't. So, and my understanding is that the Green Brigade have contacted them a number of times, but they're just, talk to the hand, no interested. So I think that's where the fault lies. And so until they do something, nothing's going to happen. And it is counterproductive, because we do need the vocal support of those ultras. Whether you like them or not, they create the atmosphere at the games.
They do, Jim. And everybody's talking about unity, Brian. But, in order to get that, they're going to have to come together. There needs to be a coming together. I suggested yesterday even a mediator, someone to come in who can sit there, and obviously everybody wants the same. That mediator can't be someone who's employed by Celtic. It can't be someone who signed the open letter for an organisation that was as yet unnamed. It's now the Celtic Fans Collective. So someone on the outside who still wants the resolution of, obviously, fans back in the ground, club communicating better, etc., etc. Last week, I spoke about the 4 things Celtic have to do to repair this. First one was, unfortunately, to end the tenure of Wilfred Nancy, and on the back of that, Paul Tisdale had to go as well. Second one was bringing back Martin O'Neill and his coaching team. Third one was heal the rift with the fans, get the fans back in the stadium. And of course, the fifth one was bring 4 or 5 quality players in to win this league. So I think we're at stage 3, with stage 4 continuing in the background. Brian, what do you think the best thing is now? Because I was hoping that in this week of all weeks, something might have happened before the Dundee United game. Doesn't look likely now, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I mentioned earlier with Martin coming back, this is the opportune time to do it, because it's the point where people are going to be more excited about the games, more hopeful for the season. They're glad Martin's back. He's always got everyone's support. So this is the time where you say, look, we've off bail out, we've all had a few drinks. Let's get back on the bus. Let's sort it out. Let's chip in for the taxi and we'll go up the road. I think they just need to have a common sense approach. And sadly, as sort of easy as that sounds, and as much as I think everyone would agree, it seems like the most distant thing. And I'll go back to my sort of the sort of business analogy. Any corporate structure, any board in their right mind would see that if somebody come in new tomorrow, CEO, they go, right, okay, let's get this, let's get the customer base back on side. It's easy to do it, right? It makes sense from a business perspective, it makes sense from a sporting perspective. It makes sense from a PR perspective. Every metric, it would be reasonable to have that conversation, apart from the fact that they don't want to, because they're annoyed, because they're personally offended, because they're petulant and they're petty and they're unqualified for their positions. And that's the reality. So I think unless one of them is prompted from high above to make peace with to Jim's quote, the Green Brigade and the wee guys amongst it as they see it, then maybe they'll have that conversation. But I don't think they will. They should, and anyone with a lack of common sense would have that conversation. And I think it's the opportune time to do it. If ever there was a time, it's right now. But it's almost the case that go, John, do you know what? No, they were shouting at us, they don't want us there, fine, but we don't want them there. And it's petty, and it's petulant, and it's stupid, and it's self-defeating, and it's no helping anybody. And it's and again, it's not to do with the Green Brigade themselves, because it's regardless of your opinion of them, they're still fans, they're still paying fans, and they're still fans that give a lot of time to the club and a lot of time for extra efforts for the community. So you don't have to like them to acknowledge they're a paying customer and a loyal customer and a customer you should respect. So again, easy fix, chat to them, have the conversation, iron it out, depersonalise it, and just make it about business. But they won't, sadly, in my view.
Goes back to that point we we're talking about, and Alan had the figures to back it up, with regards to the amount of revenue that Celtic fans generate. It's an incredible amount of revenue, 45%. They've got to think about that, and I know that is the entire fan base, but you've got to look after your fans, 100%. Honest Abdul says, and thank you for supporting the channel, could the Celtic fans worldwide, plus our celebrity fans, buy out the board? Well, there's a couple of things ongoing at the moment. There's been quite a lot of, I think, attention around the Celtic Supporters Limited in the last few days. They are obviously looking to proxy as many shares as they possibly can. The Celtic Trust have been working on something similar for a long time now. And I do think there's a lot of Celtic supporters who have shares. They are stakeholders. They might be wadded. They might not. But if they come together, then the figures we're looking at is you need 5% to call an EGM, but you would need to get up to somewhere around the 20%, 20 to 25% to get to a point where you need to be consulted if big decisions are being made. It's not to say that you can put stop to it, but you certainly will be in the room and you'll be part of that discussion. So Ian, 71 Mac, I read David Lowe reckons he has the proxies of 29% of shareholders. Any comment? We can talk all day, but nothing will change until Desmond can be challenged. I think in terms of when David looks at the shareholding of individual Celtic supporters, as well as himself, others involved in the CSL and others that they might be able to attract, that's maybe a target. But this is a long-term thing. It's a long-term vision of, I would say, 3 to 5 years before you could ever get to that point. Ambition gone, JJ Celtic. Again, I'm going to go back to this. I've still got massive ambitions for Celtic, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to allow us to lose the league this season because of what's happened. And I do think there's an opportunity, even at this late stage, there's still an opportunity to pull it together, JJ, and to still win the league. It is 40 years since Love Street 86, gentlemen. And the big question remains, will Celtic sicken Hearts and maybe even Rangers on the last day of the season? And will Hearts finally get their revenge? It's going to be one of their ones. Alan, it could go to the last kick of the ball. It could go to goal difference. That's the situation we found ourselves in. And if it means we buy a couple of maybe even journeyman players, Jim Orr mentioned Gogic, I ordinarily wouldn't have him anywhere near Celtic. But this isn't ordinary. It's not ordinary, Jim. And this is the thing. It isn't ordinary times. We've got to roll with the punches here. When we look at tomorrow, I'm taking it for granted, Alan, that we just go back to the same shape that Martin O'Neill used before. I think that's what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not sure he's going to play right back, if it's going to be Tony Ralston or Araujo. I'm not quite sure. But I'm not expecting anything major tomorrow. That's why during the week I said, and people didn't like it, Scales will probably come back. Ralston might come back. Schmeichel will probably be in goals. I don't see big changes tomorrow, Alan, other than the shape.
I suspect you're right. It'll probably be more a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3-ish kind of pattern. and the football will be like it was under Martin, a few weeks ago, which is to say, in comparison to Ange or to Brendan Rodgers, it will be a bit more direct, a bit more balls forward, quicker, etc. Which does speak to avoiding sometimes the horseshoe of death, and it does perhaps if you've got forwards like Kyogo and like Maeda, say, if you're hitting them early in behind, that's not a bad thing to do. The downside to it, the risks with that, of course, are that we do lose an element of control. It does tend to lead to more duels, tend to lead to more stoppages in play. The game slows down. It does need to lead to more turnovers, more transition opportunities, more throw-ins, more corners, more set pieces, all that sort of stuff. Which is none of that plays to Celtic's strengths. So we'll see. I mean, Dundee United, it won't be easy. I mean, they are a fairly classic SPFL team in terms of how they set up. They will sit quite deep. Their defensive line is quite deep. They do not fanny about at the back, to use the vernacular. They will get the ball forward early and quickly. No team has less possession of the football than Dundee United in this league. And of course, they're strong at set pieces. They'll focus a lot on that. Now, a lot of their success comes in home games on this because their pitch is quite small. Celtic Park, it's not quite as easy to launch throw-ins from halfway inside Celtic's half into the box. It's a bit further. There's a few more yards to go and all that sort of thing. But they're a team who they're pretty effective in their pressing and counter-pressing game. And as we've seen with the way Celtic set up, the style of players that we've got, we're not terribly press resistant either at the back or in midfield. So there'll be plenty of issues there. Listen, as I say, Martin O'Neill's back. He's an intelligent man. He's a legend. None of that will change. But he's still got the same group of players to deal with who put in some appalling performances under Brendan Rodgers, appalling performances under Martin O'Neill, and appalling performances under Wilfred Nancy.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for tuning in. 4,700 strong on a Friday afternoon. It's always an absolute pleasure to be joined by these guys. And hopefully you can have a look at their perspective. It might even change your own. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, you've not subscribed yet, it's all free. 365 days a year, free award-winning content. Get subscribing, give us a big thumbs up, and hit the notifications bell. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you to Brian, Jim, and Alan for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.